Sorry. I see. Sheets. Oh, where are the sheets?
Recording is.
They bring you on?
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Vincent, nice to meet you.
Hello, nice to meet you as well.
Hello, everybody else.
Chocolates $5.5. Lord, sorry. Don't worry. Perfect.
Hello, everyone.
Hello,
Remember-
Rita, Councilmember Russell was under attendees, but then she went off. So I don't know if she's coming on or not. Oh, here she comes. Okay.
Does she get the same link as we do to come in as a panelist?
You know, can you hear me?
Yes, Councilmember Russell.
So were you talking about me?
Yeah, I was asking if you got the same link as we do in the email for coming in as a panelist as opposed to an attendee.
This time, actually, Maureen, I have gotten it before, but last month I realized I had to go into my junk email to look for something and you had got sent there. So I was just joining before from that, but tonight I had the link. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, let's call this meeting to order. And will you please take roll, Ms. Willis?
I sure will. Chair Green,
Present?
Chair Watson, or Vice Chair Watson. Member Strom,
Present.
Member Hughes. Member Emil Hines,
He
Member
let us know
Chisholm?
that he wouldn't be able to be here tonight.
Member Chisholm. And brand new member Vincent.
Present.
Hello, Member
Alternate
Vince.
member Redivid.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Willis. We'll start with public forum. I don't see any attendees. Are you aware of anyone wanting to address us? Okay, so no one's present for public forum, so we'll move on. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review our minutes. Is there a motion to approve them? Member
motion.
Hughes raised her hand, and I'll take yours. Member Strom as a second. Did anyone have any corrections or discussion on the minutes?
Who
Ms. Willis?
moved first? I didn't see that.
Member Hughes made the motion. Member Strom seconded,
Thank you.
and Vice Chair Watson just showed up. And please take the vote, Ms. Willis, on the minutes approval.
All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
We don't have visual on Vice Chair Watson yet. Are you able to turn your camera on? But
Aye.
Aye.
So I'm just gonna say unanimous.
It's not showing a mic on the
I know,
list
and
for
I don't know
Vice Chair Watson. Yeah,
why.
I don't know.
I
if
actually planned on abstaining because I wasn't at that meeting.
Thank you, Member Vincent. I always think that's appropriate, but typically we do allow, because you could have watched the video and reviewed the minutes, so that's on kind of a member preference basis. But thank you. We'll take that as a pass then, right? We had 4 yays. And just to be clear, remember.
We had 5.
We had 5?
Yeah, I'm assuming that, well, he wasn't here either, so we'll make him an abstention as well. Vice Chair Watson, so it would
But
be
since
4.
we don't have everyone, alternate member Redivid is able to vote anyway, right?
That's correct.
Yes. Okay, just clarifying. Okay, we'll move on. Hello, Code Manager Lewis. You want to take us through your report?
Hello. Welcome to a snowy edition of CEAC. It's been a very complicated day in the city of Inglewood, so I appreciate that we were able to move this, Vice Chair. I think that was a great call on your part. So I just wanted to go through the report. I'm not predicting any trends as we normally see. It is a little bit unusual, as you know, as you can see from the report, some of the activities that we do are seasonally based. And so you'll notice that we had almost 400 snow violations, and those occurred mostly at the end of December. As of right now, just to put this in perspective, we are over 600 snow complaints so far that we've issued since the snow season has started. So the code enforcement team has been extremely busy and re-inspecting and going out and taking care of snow violations. It is a very unusual season because we had multiple days compounded by very cold weather and heavy snow. And so it really has complicated things as things start draining and then backing up and then refreezing. So we really tried to work with the community in addressing some of those and then referring any long-term concerns over to the streets department so that they could come out and do some ice breaking, which they've been working tirelessly nonstop in ice breaking and snow and ice removal. So I really do need to give a hats off to that team. Was there any specific questions that you had about the statistics?
Oh, go ahead, Member Hughes. You're muted.
I had a question on the snow enforcement.
Uh-huh.
Are most of those violations like not clearing sidewalks or what are they mostly?
Yeah, it's mostly dealing with sidewalk related matters.
Is it mostly commercial?
A mixture of both. I'm not able to delineate between the two within our reporting systems.
Is there any fine or any
So the way that the snow ordinance is written is that we are required to give each property that is in violation per snow season a warning. So a majority, I would say 97% of them are warnings and did not result in a fine.
and when do they get a fine?
So this is, I know that you've talked about this. The
Mhm.
snow ordinance is very complicated. They would receive a fine if they had additional violations due to an additional snowstorm. So if there was like this snowstorm, if a business or a property is in violation for their second time, then they would receive a ticket. We're trying to find alternate ways because, as you know, Member Hughes, that when it comes to dealing with business entities, it's very difficult to track down those particular individuals to issue summons. And so we're working with the city attorney's office on bringing something forward to council that would be more easily available to code enforcement when it comes to issuing certain types of violations bureaus situations.
I think that's a good thing. To be able to make it easier to levy fines. Just in my neighborhood on Hamden, the commercial, many of the commercial spaces do not clear their sidewalks at all. And they're here, they
Right.
own the buildings. Some are vacant land, but they've gotten, they know where they are because they've been violation for weeds.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think it's really important
Thank you for bringing that
to
forward.
make it, to make it easier
Yes.
to be able to do that, to enforce. Because if we don't enforce, you get nothing. They won't do
Right.
anything.
So one of the steps that council took, if you and Councilmember Russell has her hand up, she's going to ask a question, is they recently authorized the city to send uncollected fines and fees forward to a collections department. And so we're working on streamlining that process between code, the violations bureau, and how we can collect on those. Because the way it's written is we would normally abate the property and issue a tax lien. And so we're currently working with the city attorney's office and council to make that easier to enforce, especially on those businesses where if you've ever tried to look up a business, for example, we'll take a 7-Eleven. Well, you look up the 7-Eleven business owner and it would go to an LLC. That LLC might be registered in another management name or a manager's organization that may be located out of state. And so we're really trying to figure out how we can best resolve that and bridge that. I don't want to say a loophole, but a gap with some of our some of the business owners or properties or registered agents of a property.
Okay.
Councilmember Russell.
Thank you, and thank you, Code Manager Lewis. So I actually have two questions now. would you please remind me, did we change it from the notification process? You know how we used to do it? You got 7 days
Mhm.
to get it done. That part was changed, right?
Yes, that part was really mostly eliminated in favor of adding instead of the 12 hours, the 24-hour violation and the 1 warning per season. That way it gives us, it was not enforceable the way that it was done, because if you think about it, if they get the 7 days, in reality in Colorado, most of it melts. So we went to the penalty of you get the warning, and then the second time we would go back out, and that would be a violation.
Right. And then the other question that I had for you, this is the one I was originally going to ask, is so I've noticed on Dartmouth especially,
Mhm.
there people shoveled their walks, and then the snowplow comes along and puts it back on, but you can still see that the person shoveled. Then when the snow starts melting, it's a sheet of ice. And I mean, I think that's something homeowners really struggle with. I know that, and I greatly appreciate Public Works, because I noticed last Saturday I went to a meeting at 8 in the morning and they were out plowing there, but you know, some of that has gone on. And so I think perhaps one person sent me a text and said they've been out of town. So I think mostly Public Works is doing it on call basis, correct?
They've identified a few key areas. I will say, from my perspective, from being in the city, it has been very, 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 and again, you really need to thank the streets people. They have really been trying, and they just have not been able to keep up because of the way it is. We really do work with the homeowners in those circumstances. We understand that the snowplow may redeposit multiple times back into the area, especially if it's areas that CDOT is responsible for. And so we really do have an empathy. And you'll notice that this isn't isolated to Inglewood. We've talked about this before. Those north-facing areas sometimes just get that way. And it's not a solution, but sometimes we just need to use reasonable expectations. And at times we may need to walk across the street to where it's a little bit sunnier, just knowing that the city is struggling, the metro area is struggling, and we really got hammered this year. And so we're trying to do this with a finesse on a case-by-case situation based off of their location.
I appreciate that. And I just appreciate all that you're doing. And we have had a lot more snow this year than we have had in previous years. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And the benefit of this is I'm hoping that we have a better summer and spring and less wildfire risks this summer. So it really will pay off in the long run, which is a benefit to this.
Code Manager Lewis, in November, you gave us the the third and fourth quarter statistics, and we saw that we were very confused by them because or I guess it was the second and third, and because there were a bunch of repeated numbers, it was clearly not accurate. Has that been updated?
It has. The way that the information in that original spread, we had to change the way that we were doing our spreadsheet format. And so there was a glitch that we identified, and that has been corrected.
So will you please get us those corrected ones for next time?
Yes, I thought that had been resent to everybody and posted, and then council was also updated. So I will try and remember to do that. I will present to you, I had hoped to have to you all the end of year report by this meeting. Unfortunately, we had an Adobe licensing throughout the city concern. And so a variety of us weren't able to edit or do any kind of reporting. And so that ran into a timely fashion for not just my department, but a variety, and that glitch has been solved. So by the next meeting, you will have the end of year, an entire year snapshot of what occurred.
Thank you. And what is one thing that is massively increased was trees compared to the prior years? Is that because of scrutiny due to emerald ash borer, or what else is affecting trees?
No, so the codes division isn't able to inspect for emerald ash in a way an arborist would, and as you all know, it isn't quite moved in here yet. The scrutiny has come because of the snow, the heavy winds, the heavy snows, and so we were seeing accumulations or breakage in a variety of large trees that were causing obstructions in alleyways or roadways. And again, that is the responsibility of the homeowner to clear. And some, due to the unusual heavy snows that we received, arborists were booked out. And so we were seeing significant delays in responding to the down branches and trees that were littering the entire city.
And then what is, have different things fallen into miscellaneous code, since that's also basically doubled from previous years? What is
so
primarily in there?
Miscellaneous codes would catch all the one-off type situations. For example, it might be, this is one that we get from time to time, a cactus that might be growing too close to the sidewalk and has maybe hurt someone. Something that would fit into an unusual code that doesn't fit into the primary categories that you would see on there. Quite a few of them usually are kind of odd animal related things, but they don't rise to the level of cruelty and neglect or a specific animal control. Or it could be related to partnering with zoning or community development on some type of an enforcement action that we're taking to up to and including short-term rental violations, those types of things, where we aren't the primary organization, but we may be assisting and providing, and so we would need to document that interaction.
Is short-term rental what has caused it to double each year?
It's not. It has increasingly, as people start, we're seeing a density increase, and as we start seeing people working more from home, we're seeing an increase in complaints about kind of one-off nuisance kind of concerns that people are recognizing. We're also receiving additional complaints from regarding some backyard usages. It could be like a fire pit. It could be a variety of different things that don't typically categorize out, but warrant a documentation in some way.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Code Manager Lewis on the report? Okay, thank you very much, Code Manager Lewis.
You're welcome.
Now we have an update from City Council Member Russell.
Thank you. So I just have a couple of things. The methamphetamine remediation has been ongoing. The second floor restrooms have tested clean, but in the remediation process, the vanities fell off the wall. So they're still waiting on putting new vanities in those restrooms. I don't think they're done with the library yet. I haven't heard any more update on that, but so that is good news that the remediation is working. City Council had a workshop on Saturday from 9 to 4 in the afternoon, and we talked about the redevelopment of City Center, the City Center area all day, and it was a productive meeting, but I think there's still a lot of work going on. We mostly met with the Downtown Development Authority, and the L&R property owners were there. So, and we had some planning. So we'll see where this goes from here. And that's pretty much it for now.
So is the library reopened?
No, the library is reopened for pickup. You can pick up at the curb there, but they are not using the library yet. And actually, I think right away, the library, like some of the children's programs, they were doing those in the community center or the community room during the day. So some of their services are still moving, but the library itself is not open yet.
Do we know when it will be?
I have not heard yet. So, and it may be a little bit more time consuming in the library because there were surfaces and different things. The The restrooms, they haven't really said anything about the first floor yet, so I'm hoping that that will be pretty soon, but I do not know.
Thank you. And on the, is there any, like, so the redevelopment of the city center in discussion, is this like a decided thing that it will happen, or is this a possibility discussion? What all is happening there?
This time it was about SKB, the master developer that they wanted to hire, they left. And so now we're looking at having to hire another master developer. And so this was mostly to talk about what we wanted to do and the reason why SKB left. I think that there were council members that were not happy with the direction that it was going, and some of the Downtown Development Authority members were not happy. They felt like it wasn't as open as it should be. I think there's still some discussion to be had, and this is my personal concern, is the certificates of participation were paid off last year. And EAF, Inglewood Environmental Foundation, needs to be shut down because the debt's been paid off by the citizens. And so I think that part of the reason there's some kind of waiting on this is because I personally believe this needs to go to a vote of the people. The property now belongs to the people, and it should go to a vote of the people, but I'm not sure that's necessarily what the powers of be want. So we'll see. It's in a process. LNR, who owns the Weingarten property, which is along Hampton Avenue, probably from Galapago to Inca. It's really 4 city blocks. That is in foreclosure. They have given their bondholders drop dead date that they need to close on that property by the first or second quarter of 2024. So I think that community development has their work cut out trying to get all of this done before then. And so whatever happens with LNR, if I know they can't wait forever because the bondholders would like their money. But so it was a planning session, and I think probably to see if we can get city council and the DDA on the same page. So that's where it's at right now.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for City Councilmember Russell? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the subcommittee update. Vice Chair Watson and Member Redavid. I know Member Redavid had some emails. Do you want to fill us in on what you learned?
Yeah, I spoke with Crystal today on the phone. I called her because we hadn't gotten any replies. And what she said is any social media stuff would go to her. Anything that would be for the magazine would go through Code Manager Lewis, and then would go to them. And so I just asked her to make sure we had the deadline so we would know if there was something we wanted to get into a print copy, we would have the timeline. Tomorrow is the deadline for the next one. So if there was anything that wanted to be included, they'd have to have it by tomorrow. But other than that, that's pretty much it. And it would go through Vanessa and Amanda for the magazine through Code Manager Lewis.
Okay. So Code Manager Lewis, can you fill me in on the change as far as what's happened with this versus the way it was happening prior? Because we used to, within this committee, plan out what we were going to put in the magazine and emphasize in social media, but that hasn't happened in a while. And Member Redavid was informed that it all goes through you and that you have the deadlines, but we haven't been discussing those or the topics necessarily. What is the process now?
Well, I apologize, and I'm very embarrassed because I was not looped into this new process. There were some meetings that have occurred with communications, and Crystal, who is our community resource liaison. So I apologize, I can't give you those details because I don't even know. So I'm going to have to get those details and iron the process out with everyone. So I am very embarrassed and I am very sorry on behalf of the city that I was not included in that process. But I will set a meeting with Crystal to iron those things out.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, no worries. And I guess just let us know next month and we can start coordinating with you and planning for topics and stuff.
Yes, so the next magazine, I don't think I've received an email. Usually they give story idea.
They said they're, oh, sorry to interrupt. I forgot to mention, they said they are still determining after tomorrow's deadline of noon. They're still determining the next deadlines and they haven't given those to you yet. So they did specify that I think with their new department changes, they're working that out. So
Okay.
They did specify that they hadn't given it to you, but that they would.
Okay, good. I kind of feel like I've been left out here and stood in the corner. So I'm glad that they let you know that process. Because normally I get notifications through our system, our automated systems, that there's outstanding dated material and that I need to review it. And so I will forward that to you as soon as I get it. I apologize.
And do we know if there's any code enforcement related content going in as of the deadline tomorrow?
I think the only updated thing that I'm aware of, I made the recommendation that we needed to have a conversation about reminding folks about alleyways because it's the spring, weeds, neighborhood cleanup opportunities and grants. So I think those were the things that were going in, but again, we don't do the copy any longer. We'll give story ideas and give bullet points and they'll develop the story ideas for us. So
Chris
that
did say she was running something that she had discussed with you on social media this week. But she didn't clarify what it was, but maybe
yeah.
it's that.
That's no, the one for this week we discussed it is going to be an upcoming cops and coffee with a cop. And then we're talking, it's not finalized yet, but we're doing an event at Centennial Park in May, where it's going to be a kids fishing derby that code enforcement and police are hosting. So we're working with the state to have that stocked the day before, and we're going to have a competition and contest. And we're hoping that this is going to be, it's called Cops and Bobbers. It's going to be an annual event that we're going to be putting forward. So just a little spoiler alert that those are the things that we're working on. It wasn't quite ready to be released, but I feel comfortable in sharing that with you all.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for pushing that through, Member Radovid. Did you have anything to add, Vice Chair Watson? Looks like you're back on audio, or do you have audio? Not sure.
I do have audio.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm working on getting video right now.
Okay, no worries.
But yeah, we've got to stop doing this during snowstorms.
Yeah, I mean, we were all looking forward, I think, to having an in-person meeting, which we didn't last week or last month because Code Manager Lewis wasn't going to be able to attend, and I wanted to, move it forward to this month so that we could all be there. And then this happened, and there was a lot of requests to meet in, virtually today.
No, I know. I lost power last month.
Oh wow!
During that snowstorm, so. I'm sorry, but I had other priorities. That's why I missed the meeting, but yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Did you have anything else on the subcommittee topic?
I did not, but I have been following the emails going back and forth. So I appreciate Member Ravidich, what she said.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's, go ahead, Member Hughes.
Yes, for David Lewis. Do you need help from this group for that event?
Right now, we're still just formalizing the finalization. I'm not sure if we're going to need help from this group. I would definitely, if anybody here has fishing experience and might potentially want to come out and help. We have 100 fishing poles that have been donated that we are going to give to kiddos. We're going to get some door prizes for like the biggest fish, the most fish. I really have been working with Crystal, our neighborhood coordinator. This was an idea that came up pre-COVID, and we just weren't able to move it forward until this year. That we really wanted to focus on education, having a fun day, having some food, and really highlighting. I'm impartial to this. One of my favorite parks at Centennial is one of my most favorite because of the water and the opportunities that it offers to recreate, and the amazing fishing that we have. It's the only water body that we have. So yes, we can talk about how we can incorporate some of your all's help.
Okay. Do you have a date?
Tentatively, it is going to be May 20th from about 8 to noon.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Member Hughes. And Code Manager Lewis. Okay, let's move on to our new business. So we have this ordinance change regarding property reinspection fees, which has already been partly discussed, but I'd like to get into some more detail on that. Code Manager Lewis, can you fill us in on what this is all about from a high level
Certainly.
and into some details?
So one of the concerns that the codes division has is that we are spending an additional amount of time and resources on behalf of the city for ongoing re-inspections for those properties that are not compliant. And these are some of our more significant properties. We also wanted to make sure that we were consistent with other city departments, such as the building department, the fire department, fire marshal's office, other city departments that do charge sometimes very extensive, but mostly nominal fees for re-inspections. And that's only to allow for a more robust voluntary compliance process. But to also, we're giving our expertise on how to fix a property, work through a concern. We try to provide resources and give a reasonable amount of time. What we're seeing, and this is an extreme situation, is we have cases that could potentially last over a year to 18 months, in which we're seeing very little progress move on a property. And the court has been asking us to re-inspect properties every 2 weeks. So if you can imagine having a property that's out of compliance for 18 months and having to do 2 inspections per month and seeing very little progress, the amount of time, energy, and drain that it has on the city and the potential cost recovery and the opportunity for the city to really recoup some of the fees that that the city is spending on multiple re-inspections. We're very fortunate that for most of the violations, the minor violations, 96% of those come into voluntary compliance within 30 days. That's the average that it takes. But we are seeing properties that are less than cooperative in getting those violations corrected. And so we're really wanting to emphasize the voluntary plus the cost recovery to the city for the ongoing inspections that the city incurs.
So one question I have that seems to me ambiguous is if a particular property has like say a snow violation, they get notified, they take care of it, then it's re-inspected to verify they took care of it, and then there's no issue, right?
Then there's no issue. There's no inspection fee that would occur.
Okay, and if upon the re-inspection it wasn't taken care of and they're further notified, or I guess at that point they would get a fine?
We would go ahead and snow is kind of a weird thing because it most of the time self-corrects. We would use these on extensive trash, outdoor storage, those types of violations, any type of health and safety matters, where we've been out 2 times. The 3rd time we're back out, there's still no correction. We're going to issue a summons, but every time we have to go back out to re-inspect that property towards compliance, there would be a $55 fine that would be our fee that would be levied against the property for the time that the city is utilizing to re-inspect. And again, that's very consistent with the fire marshal's office. It's very consistent with the building department. The codes department, they've never actually thought of it, but have realized that's a cost recovery that the city needs an opportunity to reflect, that the citizens, the tax-paying citizens, shouldn't continually pay for the service of those people that are habitual violators.
So where I was going with my question was
Sorry.
more, it's okay. That was all helpful. Was across types of violations. So if you've had a reinspection for snow, but then later in the year you get a reinspection for weeds, are those cumulative, or is it per violation type?
It would be per incident. So the way that ordinance is written under nuisance is we get a violation, they correct the violation, then that case is closed. We would open a brand new case, just like for snow. All the snow's melted, it's done, they're in compliance. We get a new snow event. That snow is therefore a violation. That's a new violation, a new action will be taken, and we have an enhancement now. The same thing would happen with trash or with weeds. It's not cumulative over a time frame. It's for that particular case.
So I may be just not interpreting it right, but when I read, Title 6, Chapter 5, EMC 6-5-2, the underlined part says, after an initial inspection and reinspection of any property in a calendar year, the property owner or other person causing or contributing to a violation shall pay the city reinspection fee for every successive inspection of a parcel by city staff to determine compliance with the Uniform Development Code, environmental codes, or England Municipal Code titles. That to me sounds like every successive inspection, not for a particular violation or a particular type of violation, but cumulative across all violations. It could certainly be interpreted that way, at least the way I read it.
It could be. That's not the intent of this. The intent is primarily to deal with those habitual properties. If we do put a property on notice, let's say for being a nuisance, they have multiple violations within a year. I think this is what it's supposed to encapsulate, that we go directly. It allows us an ordinance under nuisance not to have to go through the same process that we've already done, because we've already smacked ourselves in the face so many times with the same violations, that we automatically go to the summons process. So we would bypass the warning, the notice, and go directly to summons, and then that's when this particular ordinance would also cover that.
Well, since that's the intent, is there a reason that it couldn't be modified to make it more clear that it's cumulative per violation?
I can talk to the city attorney to see what she would suggest.
Okay. I go ahead, Member Vincent.
Sorry, my mouse went to sleep. So Director Lewis, I have a question about if this is an issue of nuisance, meaning multiple issues with a property or multiple properties over time. If first interaction is number one, and then you come back by in 2 weeks and say a citizen like myself, just because of schedule, doesn't see the notice that was left on my back fence or front fence or whatever. And then when you come back for the third time, then there would be a fine if I don't remove something. I mean, I'm using myself as a point in case. Would that in my mind doesn't seem like it rises to nuisance, but it sounds like it would start generating I think, revenue and more concern by the citizens. It seems to rise everyone to a level rather rapidly to getting these fines. And I don't know if everybody needs to be lumped into that same pocket is my concern. Meaning if we do have these nuisances that are bothering you over 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, yes, please, let's start finding those people because they are burning our resources. But if I've got a neighbor who's got an issue for a month or gets sick and can't do something, and now all of a sudden they're incurring city fines, I would be concerned about that.
So you bring up a great point, and I think if you were to read all the ordinances, if you were to work through any type of municipal code, even the state law, there's a level of officer discretion in there. And so we try to write ordinances that allow us to utilize that discretion, not to have such an absolute, because if we start going into ordinance and putting specific absolutes, then the one thing that we want to do is we work with everyone. There really isn't been a complaint against the city where, for you example, if you were to come to code enforcement and say, oh, I just received the notice, what can we do? I've been out of town or this person's sick. We have resources and abilities to work with someone. The whole thing is we're supposed to be working together to correct the problem. But when we stop getting that voluntary compliance, the biggest concern is mostly from the court. The court has been, in recent years, has been directing code enforcement to conduct re-inspections multiple times, but then fines, fees, and everything are suspended. So then they're paying a court cost of, let's say, for an example, $25, $30, and all the fines, fees, and everything were suspended. I think that's where we're running into the concern. And that's why it's written to the way that there's no absolute, like it must happen on this third inspection after this many cases. It's really allowing for more flexibility in the way that enforcement is done, because enforcement is not black and white. It's a little bit more gray. As you all start seeing with the inspections, there might be a violation, but how we work with that person or that property, we try to do it within the confines of municipal ordinance, but there's also discretion to work with them and make sure that they're getting voluntary compliance. It's that moment where we start getting compliance or they choose not to, and we have to go through the court route.
Thank you for your question, Member Vincent. That was good. And Code Manager Lewis, I appreciate the discretion. Like that was something that was pretty obvious in the way that the wording was around the changes recently to the animal code, and that all made sense. In this case, I don't see the discretion written into this. I see after an initial inspection and reinspection, the property owner or other person causing or contributing to a violation shall pay the city reinspection fee for every successive inspection. I don't see any room for discretion in that.
Let me see if that word can be changed to may. I think the biggest concern that we had was regarding some court actions. And again, there's the executive branch and the judicial branch, and the way sometimes things are adjudicated, the citizens are having concerns about how that whole process is playing out. But yes, I can look at seeing if that word can be changed to may instead of shall. I think that
would
might
like
clear
to
it up.
see it also personally, made. So if the main issue is court ordered re-inspections, then why are we blanket applying it to all? If most of the issues with the resources being tied up are due to court, couldn't this just be written that if the court orders re-inspections, then the person has to pay, instead of changing it changing what has been in place for a long time?
There could be that opportunity. I think what we're looking at, and again, we can change it to be a little bit more reflective of what the group wants, is that aspect of code enforcement. And I'll use an example of a property that's on Clarkson or Logan, close to the high school area, that has just been a habitual nuisance that every single department has worked on. And has just been a drain on the resources, and it would allow us to also move those fines and fees associated with a property based off of what council did to lien the property and or send it to collections. Because it is a significant drain. So I think maybe asking the city attorney what she might be able to do to allow for a little bit more discretion when it comes to that aspect.
All right, well, how about this? I'd suggest, I think I understand the concern that member Vincent brought up, and, unless I'd like to take temperature and get any input from everyone else, but maybe, I could write an email to the city attorney asking about these things that we've just discussed to get her feedback. And City Council Member Russell, you had your hand up at one point. Did you have something on this?
Well, the only thing that I was asking, I appreciate the discussion that you all are having, but if there's total discretion, then doesn't that open itself for selective enforcement if the officers are deciding? I do have a question. In the past, I remember that if there was a nuisance that went before the court, didn't the judge, and I don't know, I have had no reason to be in court lately, but if the person was making progress, I mean, didn't they have to come before the court and give a progress report, and then the court could either give them additional time? Is that how it still works, Code Manager Lewis?
So I get your question about discretion. It doesn't allow for selective enforcement because it's just like a police officer. If they are going to go ahead and pull people over for speeding, it's their discretion whether or not to write the violation. We do have a process outlined with the municipal code that we consistently follow, and we try to show that it's consistently followed. As far as the judge, we've been working on a variety of aspects, but the court will always ask for code enforcement to do an inspection before an additional hearing. So one particular case, again, it's the every other week to show progress. The progress was so minimal that it really was causing more of a concern for the neighborhood that this pile of trash would be moved over here to this area, or this thing would be relocated to this area. So it looked like things were progressing, but in reality, they weren't. We ended up having to abate, getting a court order to abate that property and lien the taxes, but that was an 18-month process.
So in a sense, I actually think this might be more effective in some ways for code enforcement to go out, because if the person just comes to court, yeah, I've been doing this, I moved it, but if code enforcement is involved, then it does give some credence to what really has been done. So thank you. I appreciate it.
That makes sense too. Thank you, Councilmember Russell. And thank you for all of your clarity, Code Manager Lewis. So what I was suggesting is maybe I draft a letter to the city attorney asking these questions, and then we can see how she responds, and we'll get those into the agenda for discussion for our next meeting, unless anyone has any feedback or other thoughts on that.
I had just one more thing to point out, if I may.
Sure.
Part of the little pieces that we're changing in ordinance are potentially looking at some trends that are happening. One thing that I'm concerned about, and I've talked about multiple times with this team, is the protection of somebody's civil liberties or their constitutional rights. And one of the concerns that I have is that we are bogging down our court system with cases that necessarily shouldn't have to go to the court system. And so I'm partnering with the city attorney's office and a few other cities to see how we can move some of these violations out of a court system where someone's going to get a criminal record for not cutting their weeds or putting their trash away into more of a violation aspect where it's similar to a parking ticket, where you have an opportunity to come in, answer, pay a fine for the ongoing concerns that you have. But you also have an opportunity to due process to contest that and have a hearing. And so I just wanted to point that out to this team, that that's something that might be coming forward in the next year, because we are finding, one, it's very burdensome. Two, it's not keeping in the good spirit of what our Constitution has. I mean, why is somebody going to have a municipal code criminal violation on their record for not pulling their weeds or having their dog off leash? And so we're trying to really streamline that. And this is part of that process that we are hoping to change and make it more effective for code enforcement to do their job, but to also do justice to our citizens and allow them to maintain some of their rights. Because if you do have a criminal violation on your record, it does impact your ability to do banking. It inhibits your ability to be insured properly. And potentially job consequences. And so we really wanted to make sure that we are evaluating that process as we move forward as well.
Thank you for pointing that out. That makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate that. I just would want to caution against changes that push us into like a more frequent, higher quantity, more likelihood of citizens facing fines for things that they could be notified about and corrected. In the structure changes you're talking about potentially making, would it still be that people get warnings and can correct it without having fines?
So the way that this model that I'm looking at would do is it allows someone to correct the violation, schedule an appointment for code enforcement to inspect, and if the violation's been corrected, it would be dismissed.
And that would be without inspection fees?
That's the way that the process is that we're looking at.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And Member Vincent, you had your hand up?
I did. So Director Lewis, I too would love it if you had a conversation with the city attorney to see if that shall could be changed to may. One of my other interactions with the city is with the police department, and that level of officer discretion I think sometimes is really important, and a shall I think places your officers in a place where they might have discretion removed from them, where they know they have somebody, a citizen who they're working with, and they know they're working with, and this person is just in a bad spot. And the may of just somebody having a bad day, but responds to an officer well, I think would be a better way of interacting with the citizens of Inglewood, to say, hey, I just know you're having a bad time, but you're going to get to these weeds, within 2 or 3 weeks. And it's outside of what might be a normal window, but it would give the discretion to the officer to say, hey, I'm going to swing back by in 3 weeks. Just try to get this taken care of, and you won't have anything to worry about. So I like the change from shall to may.
Thank you, Member Vincent. So what I'm suggesting is I'll write a letter, and that would definitely be part of what I put in it. And then I would also like to ask her about clarification so that it's not ambiguously that any inspection or any reinspection for the same property, but that it is within a particular violation or type of violation per year at least, so that's not, so your reinspection for your one weed notification doesn't cost you fees because you had one for snow earlier in the year or something like that. Member Hughes, you had your hand up?
Yes. I want to just make a comment that I agree with everything that everybody's said so far, particularly on the discretion. But I am very happy that we're trying to give more teeth to the code enforcement activities. I do think that there's a lot of attitude of blowing it off. And I think the more that we can have the ability, not saying that we're going to use it all the time, but to give code enforcement more teeth to enforce codes, I think is very important. And I think it's a good move.
Thank you, Member Hughes. Does anyone else have any other comments, questions, points? Did anyone else notice anything else within this change that they wanted to ask about that we haven't discussed? Okay, thank you very much, Code Manager Lewis, for going through that. I will draft an email and send that to the city attorney and make sure that that ends up in our agenda and her response, so we can discuss that in our next meeting. And hopefully we can come up with something that we recommend to city council on this. And we'll move on. So we have our unfinished business is discussing our priorities. We started talking about that in our last meeting. Has anyone come up with any other ideas around priorities that we'd like to take into account? Go ahead, Code Manager Lewis.
So I've had some conversations with the code team and with some of the executive level management team. I would like to at some point bring forward the generalized list, similar to what you see enforceable of the ongoing concerns that we have. And I kind of would like to have this organization, this body, take a look at some of those and rank what they feel is of importance and what you would feel would be less important for enforcement. And this would help strategize the way that code enforcement is doing its enforcement efforts. And again, this would change year after year. I kind of would like this to be an ongoing yearly thing because it's based off of trends, it's based off of development, it's based on different neighborhoods, where you would place certain things. We do have limited amount of resources, time, and things that go into our proactive enforcement. And so we would like to kind of hear ideas from this group that we can kind of take and utilize when we're doing our proactive stuff. Outside of health and safety matters, these are more of like, do you want us to worry about fire pits? How important do you feel weed enforcement is? How important do you feel where someone's trash cans are placed? Or what kind of priority, high, medium, or low, that you would place on the value on that enforcement effort?
Okay, do you have a list of things you'd like us to consider and provide feedback on?
I have not yet, because it's been a new conversations the last couple of weeks with my team, because when they go out to do proactive enforcement, if you can imagine them having to calculate potentially up to 500 different ordinance violations whenever they look at a property within a 1 minute peak, we kind of would like to get some input. So we'll put together maybe our top 10 or our top 15 and send those forward as to what you all would recommend.
Okay, yeah, I'd appreciate that. And then just to review some of the things that came up in our discussion last time, Member Emmelheinz brought up that he's aware that there's a lot of questions and concerns around trash, and I'm sure that that's enhanced with the changes to availability of service in the alley. So I know that, trash is going to be something that we want to take into account and figure out how to communicate around. So I know one way or another that's going to be in there. Councilmember Russell had brought up waste management, missing pickups. There was a lot of discussion around just making sure that citizens know how to communicate with code enforcement through the website, through the app, through phone calls, etc. Because it seems that not everybody's aware that you can report an issue to code enforcement and then be able to, to some degree, be aware of, as that goes through the system, that they're taking care of it, addressing it. Member Chisholm talked a lot about communication, and the result of our conversation there was that we want to come up with like a code enforcement fact sheet, which I think that's a great thing for our priorities that just, you know, we reviewed what, like member Edvid pointed out, what's on the current website. I took a look at that. And I think it can be refined some more and just more directly clear about, you know, what matters code enforcement wise. So coming up with that fact sheet or what gets included in that, I think we could put a lot of discussion and thought into that. You know, ongoing, we've talked about communication, utilizing social media and the Facebook, Nextdoor, Instagram, opportunities to communicate with the public. There's, you know, member Chisholm brought up, you know, nobody cares about any of this stuff until it's their problem, until there's an issue that, you know, comes around to them, and wanting to make sure that it's easy for citizens to figure out, you know, how to deal with when there is a problem, which obviously can be reporting, but it can also be around dealing with something that's been reported on them. And then, you know, where there's gray zone, like, you know, we've had several discussions about discretion. I mean, I think Code Manager Lewis's point about discretion being a regular part of law enforcement makes sense. I mean, when you do get pulled over, a police officer has a lot of discretion in how they're, you know, what they're gonna, you know, you could pretty much find a violation on everyone's vehicle. You could find a violation of something for everyone, and, you know, attitude of the recipient matters. And so there's, you know, there's going to be discretion involved, and it's pretty impossible to completely flush out bias by making rules so specific that they cover every variation of things. But I think it's still worth discussion. We always want to make sure things are fair. I mean, have discretion where it might make sense, but also, you know, not so much that it, you know, if there are risks to unfair enforcement, then, you know, we want to address that. So those are all the things I had noted from our previous discussion. And then, so what I would suggest is, you know, this will be an ongoing discussion. Let's get the list that Code Manager Lewis will put together from city staff, and then combine that with the topics we've just discussed. And then maybe we'll actually put some time into prioritizing those in our next meeting. Unless anyone else has any feedback or thoughts on that, maybe move forward with that plan. Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
I think it's a good idea. Right.
Okay, then let's go ahead and move forward with that. Not seeing any other input. And then does anyone have any suggestions for topics for future meetings? Okay, so our next meeting will basically be the same two things. So we'll go deeper on the ordinance regarding reinspection fees with the feedback that we get from the city attorney, and then we'll further work on our priorities for recommending to, you know, for us to work on, and then also for feedback for code enforcement. So this is another opportunity, you know, if you have any engagement with other citizens, you know, to get some feedback from them, ask, you know, what matters to people. And, you know, we are kind of the citizen conduit to city council for input on these types of things. So if you get any feedback or want to generate any feedback from friends, neighbors, other citizens, and et cetera, then that's certainly encouraged. Go ahead, Member Wilson.
Is there a place that is easily found, like all the Inglewood ordinances?
Yeah, so if you go to the inglewoodco.gov site, I forget exactly where it is, but there's a click through to the full municipal code.
Okay.
And the municipal code is in a system separate from the city government site. It's a tool that the city utilizes, that many different municipalities utilize for their municipal code. and it's totally worth going through. It's actually a pretty nice interface, and you can even sign up on it to be notified of changes. And it's got a good interface for looking through historically. So you can go to any point in the municipal code and dig into the history of how something wound up where it's at and see previous changes, et cetera. And I've subscribed to so I get email notifications anytime there's a change to anything in code, because I'm always curious, and you can click through and you can see exactly what the original language was, what the change was. Sometimes it's what we've provided input on. So it's pretty well done system. And yeah, and let us know if you have any questions, or if you wanted to, we could even do, make a point in our meeting to kind of walk through that if anyone's curious about it, or if we want to look into how to read the code or what sections of code tend to pertain to the things that we're involved in. I'm sure, that's something we could do if that's something you guys would like to do. We've never actually done that. Code Manager Lewis, how do you feel about that? Like kind of doing a session where we kind of go through the parts of code that we're involved in and how that works, and maybe the process for how it changes, and et cetera.
If you'd like to set that up, that I think might be a great opportunity. I'd like someone from this group to lead and facilitate that, because it's very different from what you all do than what I would do. Also, Member Vincent and anybody else, I'm happy to meet with you at any time to just talk about, we've done in the past basic orientation, to talk about the process of, when we get a violation, this is the steps that we go through, just so you have the basic understanding of how the codes department works.
Manager Lewis, I would love that. So I will contact your office and schedule some time to sit down, especially new to the group. I definitely want to get brought up to speed as I'm, talking about stuff.
And
so thank you for that offer.
You're welcome. And again, to this body, I have an open door. You are more than welcome to come to my office, schedule a meeting, meet with me, meet with my team at any time. You are citizens first and foremost of this community, and I value your input, even if it's on a one-on-one, not in a formalized basis as this. So please remember, I'm here. If you'd like to come in, that something's just itching, you want to get out and have a conversation about, that's outside of this group, that isn't going to have any decision-making ability, I'm happy to sit down with you and meet with you. I can even meet you out in the community and have coffee. So please remember that I am open for any citizen at any time to meet with me.
Thank you very much, Code Manager Lewis. And it looks like Member Hughes is potentially interested in that as well, based on all your nods. And Member Vincent, if you end up thinking of, if you get some good input from that session with Code Manager Lewis that you think is worth talking about in our meeting, you can always bring that up, and then we can have it be on public record. And these are recorded, whether we're in person or not, so citizens can always refer to them too. So if there's something that you end up kind of hitting on in that you think is interesting and we should all review or discuss, then please let us know. So let's plan for, or does any committee member have anything you want to bring up? Okay, seeing none, let's plan for our next meeting. So our normal next meeting date looks like it'd be March 15th. And we still haven't, after we decided we were going to try and do an in-person meeting each quarter, we haven't successfully had that happen yet. So I would suggest we make that our in-person one for this quarter, unless anyone wants to suggest differently. Does that work for you, Code Manager Lewis?
Yes, and I will work with Maureen on determining what space that we would have, whether it would be at the city center or we're going to host it in the community room at the police department. It gets very complicated this time of year with scheduling conference rooms.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, either one of those would be great. Okay, then we'll plan for that. And thank you all, and we'll adjourn this meeting.
Thank
Have
you.
a great evening.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Carson, thanks, everyone.